In the previous video, we've created this concat component for our SQL statements. In this video, we are going to have a look at the statement components. So under the database, we're going to create a new directory called statement. And under this directory, we're going to create another one called query. And the first class we're going to create within the query directory is going to be the class with the same name, which is basically query. And it's going to be within the app database. Then we have statement and query namespace. If we hit OK, so that's creating a new class. And this is going to be an abstract class. We are going to start with the protected property field. And we're going to add dog blocks. It's going to be a string. Then we are going to have protected operand. By default, it's going to be equals. Then we are going to have protected binder. And by default, it's going to be a $sign. And let's just put string here. Now, this $sign later on will be replaced with either placeholder for the prepared statement or the value. Let's just continue with our class. If I just scroll up a little bit so we can see things better. Then we have protected property sub_query. By default, it's going to be set to null. So it's either null or string. Then we have protected replace SubQuery. And this one doesn't have any default value, and it's going to be Boolean. Okay, and right after this, we start with the constructor. So new constructor, and it will instantiate field. Let's just do field for now. So field equals field, which is great, but that's not the only argument we're going to be having here. The next one will be the instance of the SubQuery. We don't have this one yet, so SubQuery by default is going to be null, and then we're going to have replace SubQuery. By default, it's going to be false. So let's instantiate these fields as well. The SubQuery, we have it as here. Okay, I'm going to remove this one and have it as null or subquery. There we go. We have it snake cased here. Obviously, so I'm going to keep it this way. We could probably keep this argument here as snake cased as well. Okay, let's add dog blocks. Now we don't have this subquery class yet, so under the statement, let's create subquery directory as well. Subquery. And within this subquery, let's create a new interface called SubQuery. And it's going to be within app, database, statement, and then SubQuery. And that's an interface. And this interface will only have one method, public function query. And let's add some dog blocks. It's going to return string, get query string for a pivot table. And that's everything. That's the contract we need to have within this subquery. So if we save it and close it, now we can import it to our query class. There we go. So we've got it here. Okay, so that's our constructor done. The next method we are going to have is going to be called statement, so public function statement, and it will take a value as an argument. And first of all, we are going to check if this has subquery. We don't have this method yet, so we'll create it in just a moment. Let's then return this subquery statement, and then we pass value through. Otherwise, what we're going to return is, in between the double quotes, this field, which we pass through as an argument to the constructor, and then we space, and then this operand, There we go. And the question mark at the end. So basically, if we, let's say, pass through book ID, then operand depends on what it's going to be, because we're going to have obviously subclasses to this query one. It might be equal symbol, it might be more than, less than, like, and so on, then this operand later on, and then obviously whatever we're going to have at the end, whether it's going to be a placeholder like this question mark here, or perhaps straight values, which is going to be sent through together with the whole SQL statement. Okay, so for this statement, let's just dog block quickly. Here we've got value, which is going to be mixed because we don't know what the value is actually going to be, and then get SQL statement. And let's create this get SubQuery method now. Now get SubQuery, sorry, has SubQuery. We're simply going to return a Boolean true or false, checking if this SubQuery is instance of SubQuery interface. So whatever we pass through needs to implement this subquery. If it doesn't, then obviously this has subquery will return false, at which point we're going to get to go to this last line, and this is going to be our statement. So let's just add the dog blocks here as well. Check if there is a subquery. Obviously, if we pass null through, if we don't pass the second argument to this constructor, then obviously there won't be any subquery. Otherwise, we will have an instance of the subquery. Okay, then we have this SubQuery Statement method. So let's quickly add this one as well. So SubQuery Statement will return, and in between the brackets here, we have this field again, then this operand, and then within the bracket we're going to put the subquery. So this subquery, and then we pass value through as an argument. Obviously we need to make sure that this is in between the curly brackets. Let me just close the file browser on the left so you can see everything. So we have field in between the curly brackets, then we have operand after the space and curly brackets, then within a set of standard brackets we have curly brackets within which we have called to this subquery, and we pass value as an argument. Now our subquery method. And the subquery method, first of all, we're going to check if this exclamation mark, this replace subquery, or is not, oops, like this, or is not array value, then we'll simply return this subquery and a query on method on this subquery. So let's quickly add this replace subquery method as well. It will basically return this replace subquery. It's basically a Boolean. We could obviously use this property, but this method looks a little bit better. It basically tells us whether we should be replacing placeholders within a subquery with the value, or just return the query without replacing anything. So that's this method. Let's just quickly add dog blocks here as well. So returns Boolean, check if value should be placed directly in the subquery. Okay, if we then finish this method, return string replace, and we're going to look for the question mark, which is going to be the placeholder within our SQL statement. Then this value method, and we pass this value. So we sanitize it before we actually replace it within this subquery query. Because obviously, if the third argument is replace subquery, which we pass through as a third argument of this constructor, is true, then it means that obviously whatever query we have on this subquery instance needs to have this value replaced, basically these placeholders replaced with the actual value. So there won't be a prepared statement for this part of the SQL statement. Okay, I mean, it's all, I understand this is quite difficult to understand right away, but it will become a little bit more obvious when we're actually going to start building these subclasses, and then we're going to be able to actually go through each one, and all these methods will suddenly start making sense. So, okay, we haven't got this value yet. This method is pretty much completed, so let's quickly add the doc blocks here as well. It will either return null or string. The value will be of the mixed type as well. And then for the summary, we're going to say replace placeholder with value directly within the subquery. So this is what this method basically does. Okay, so if we scroll down after this replace subquery, let's just add the values tab. And rather than private, we need to make sure that it's public, because we might want to access this value from outside of this class. And we're going to replace string underscore replace. We're going to look for the dollar symbol, which is associated by default with the binder property. And then we are going to sanitize our value. So I'm going to use another method, sanitize a value, and I pass value through as an argument. And then the subject of this string replace is our binder. So when we have this obviously binder here in place, at the moment we have this dollar symbol associated with it. So this dollar symbol is going to be replaced with whatever value is going to be returned from this sanitize value method. Let's quickly add this method as well. And what we're going to do here basically is check if our value is not array, then we simply return it. So return value. Otherwise, what we're going to do, because if we're passing through an array, I want to make sure that all the values within this array are converted to integers. This is to make sure that we are protected from SQL injection, because we are going to have this list of checkboxes representing location. And these checkboxes will have an option to select multiple items and then obviously submit them as an array. When we allow something like this and we then want to replace the values directly on a SQL statement, we need to make sure that obviously these values are sanitized, because otherwise we are pretty much open to SQL injection. You obviously want to prevent this sort of thing. So what we're going to do here is to replace all of the values submitted through this value, if it was to be an array, convert them to integers. So we're going to start with the value equals, and then we're going to use array map. We pass the first argument is going to be the function that we want to use to filter each item in this array, which is going to be the standard PHP function called int val, which will convert each value to an integer, and then value is the subject, so our array basically. And then after this, what we're going to return is going to be a string in between brackets, and we're going to implode whatever we have now sanitized. We're going to implode it with comma and a space, and obviously our value comes here, which is obviously this array, and that's going to be what is going to be returned. In other words, if we say this value is represented by an array of, let's say, 1, 2, and 3, then the output here, after going through all this, is going to be something like this: 1, 2, and 3. That's going to be a string containing all these numbers within the set of brackets, so we can pass it into our SQL statement. Obviously, if someone maliciously submitted some string, let's say insert or something like this, then this int val makes sure that this insert is converted to an integer, at which point it will be converted to number 1 most likely. And obviously this string will never reach our SQL statement. Okay, so that's our sanitized value. Let's just add some doc blocks here. It may return array. No, it won't return array. It will always return a string, because if it is not array, then we know that it's not an array. It's going to return value. Actually, it might be string, might be integer. Let's just put mixed here. and obviously otherwise it's going to return a string anyway. Okay, this value also is mixed, so let's just make it so, and then sanitize value for the summary of this doc block. And then for the value, we simply are going to add value can also be mixed, and this string replace will return, well, if we pass the integers and value, then obviously this will be replaced with an integer, so it might be integer. Again, return mixed I think is just correct here. Okay, so what we're going to say, get value based on the binder, what expression, I think that's gonna work, because this binder later on you will see what sort of values it may contain. It may have something like, let's say, brackets, then dollar symbol in between. This is basically when we're going to be replacing this dollar symbol with whatever structure we have for this binder. But we'll get to this a little bit later on. Okay, so this is our query class, which is now complete. It's a parent class. Now, all these methods, all this will make more sense when we actually start implementing subclasses. So don't worry if you didn't get much out of this specific episode. We need these methods, and they will make sense when we actually start putting things together. I will explain, obviously when we get to this point, I will explain exactly what's happening and why we have these methods here.